to roll
with the troll.
Listen, today we are talking about Cobra Kai.
Yeah.
And kind of more specifically, we're really talking about the Karate Kid trilogy.
Yes.
You know, a little side note before we begin. When Cobra Kai started as a TV show, I remember thinking, so how are we going to refer to this IP now? Do we refer to it as Karate Kid still? Because that's going to be the more important of the two.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's all one big IP. It's two different names, but it's one big property. So I remember thinking when Cobra Kai was coming out with season 1, I thought, are we forever going to refer to this as the Karate Kid franchise, or will there be a point where Cobra Kai eclipses Karate Kid?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And at this point, I kind of think we're there. I think in a way, like when people say Cobra Kai now, they also mean Karate Kid.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Right?
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? I just think it's so like at this point, if you say Daniel LaRusso, I think you associate him more with Cobra Kai.
Yeah.
And that's a really big accomplishment on their part. So anyway, let's talk about this.
Interesting.
I heard a really interesting interview that I'm sure a lot of you guys heard too, with the cat who played in Karate Kid, in the next Karate Kid. He played Ned. And if you guys aren't familiar already, there's that interview's all over the internet. It has been for a while. It's a really interesting interview, but what he said in the interview was that when he first saw the script, Daniel was in it.
Yeah.
For the next Karate Kid. For those who don't know, if you don't know the franchise that well, the next Karate Kid is what we often call Karate Kid 4. Mm-hmm. There was the trilogy with Daniel, and then there was Hilary Swank playing Julie Pierce in Karate Kid, well, the next Karate Kid, or Karate Kid 4 we call it. So no Daniel in that movie. He gets a slight nod from Mr. Miyagi, remember? A little reference, brief, and that's it. Just to let you know he's still alive and in the universe.
Right. We don't know where he is or what's going on in his life, but he did get a mention.
Well, we get the impression that Daniel is back at the Miyagi house in California still, even though this is years later and Daniel is an older guy by now.
Oh.
But we get the impression that he's there and that Julie's grandmother is going to have to shack up with Daniel while she's visiting. Remember that?
Oh, I didn't get that impression at all.
Yeah, because she goes to stay at the house.
Yeah.
And
I didn't
Miyagi
get the impression
that
that Daniel was there.
Well, Mr. Miyagi says he has a good friend back home. Who knows what house he's in?
Okay.
So who knows? Because it's also unclear as to exactly what year this was. Remember, the Karate Kid movies are a little funny in terms of their years, because even Karate Kid Part 3, which came out 4 years after the first one, only takes place within a year of it, right?
Right.
So there's that too. There's the whole fact of like, now how many years? So is Karate Kid 4 in real time? Is where it's many, many years later? Who gives a shit? Just the point is it's really unclear as to where Daniel is. But the point is, what if Karate Kid 4 or next Karate Kid had Daniel in it? Now, the actor who plays Ned, I forget his name now, but when he plays Ned and he's talking about Daniel being in the script, he thought at the end of the movie he was going to fight Daniel. Mm-hmm. And then this guy ends up finding out later that, we changed the script, no Daniel.
Yeah.
And by the way, I don't think this was because Ralph Macchio was never actually going to be in the movie. Mm-hmm. They deliberately worked Ralph Macchio into the script solely to fool the other actors somehow. They wanted to, I don't know what that was all about. Yeah, that's a weird one, but they wanted to keep it close to their chest, I guess, that Daniel was not going to be in the film, and then do the role reversal. But initially, from the way he described it, the script looked like Julie was, because Julie's in the script, so she appeared to be Daniel's girlfriend. And I remember the guy, he's like this big muscular guy who plays Ned. Yeah. And he was talking about how he was so happy to get the role. He was really struggling as an actor. But then he finds out he's got to fight a girl at the end.
Oh, wow. That had to be so disappointing for the actors who signed on to do the project then.
Yeah, I mean, I know. Think about that, right? That
a little bit of a bait and switch.
Yeah, but I don't know the exact details. Check out that interview for more, you guys. I don't know the exact details on were they really baited and switched, or were they just given the script before they signed on, and then they probably signed on knowing. So who knows? Yeah. But here's our question for today, guys. Let's get to the point. The point is, should Daniel have appeared in Next Karate Kid? And if so, in which of these 3 ways? Because there's really only 3 ways he could have been in it. In the first way, he's like, it's an ensemble cast and he's straight up in it right alongside Mr. Miyagi the whole time. He travels with Mr. Miyagi. He's one of the main characters. And that maybe it's ultimately Julie's story, but the cast is more ensemble, and that even though it could still be more Julie's story, Daniel's still a huge part of it all, right?
Maybe together with Mr. Miyagi, he's mentoring Julie.
That's what I'm imagining, yeah.
Okay.
So that would be the first way, where Daniel is really heavy-handed in the story. A second option is that it's kind of the way it is where Mr. Miyagi shows up on his own, starts training her, and then Daniel ends up having a bigger than a cameo, but he ends up with a significant role where he shows up and starts also, like you said, mentoring her, but he doesn't show up till maybe halfway through the film or so.
Mm-hmm.
And he's integral, but not as integral as in the first scenario that I just described.
Yeah.
And I think that's also worthy of discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Then the third situation would be that it's basically just like an ending cameo, that maybe in that final fight at the end,
Yeah.
maybe I'm imagining Mr. Miyagi says something to Daniel on the phone, and then Daniel shows up wanting to help because he thinks there's going to be, I don't know. The movie's so goofy, it's hard to explain. But
I mean, the monks showed up at the end, so
Yeah.
Daniel could show up.
Daniel
at the
could have been
end.
with them. Maybe he was with them. So we'll talk about that one in a moment,
Yeah.
too. Those are some good ideas already. So let's start with the first one.
Okay.
And let's figure out, if Daniel was in this movie, what's the way to do it?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that would work if he was a full-blown integral part of the film, top to bottom?
Yeah, I think it would. It might be a little. It might be a little unrealistic for the fans, or for the audience rather. You know, if he's still, because I'm assuming this feels like it's at least, you know, a few years later or more, and is Daniel still kind of at Miyagi's side to that extent that they travel together, and he's embarking on this whole thing with Mr. Miyagi at that point. I guess you'd have to come up with some creative reason. You know, why is Daniel still doing this and not moving on with a more independent life? But it would have made for a good Karate Kid movie, I think. Because it did feel like there was an element lacking, and I think the element that was lacking was the familiarity of Daniel LaRusso.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and look, obviously, guys, like, we understand, of course, that from a filmmaking perspective, there's no way they'd have had the budget for Ralph Macchio to also join this. I'm surprised they could string together the movie as it is.
Really?
You know, yeah, Hilary Swank was an unknown, so she was cheap to get, but they still had to pay Pat Morita, and then they got Ironside, whatever the fuck. They had to pay out a good amount of money already. To get Ralph Macchio at all would have been a big financial get, right? Mm-hmm. And he was not interested, and they didn't even approach him. But we're taking that out. We're just talking for the narrative.
Yeah.
For the narrative, how would this have worked?
Yep.
I think it would have been. I don't think it'd be confusing. I think it'd be really interesting, actually.
Yeah. I agree.
think maybe back then in the 90s that was not really done. But these days, that's done all the time. You got the Expendables movies. Look at that. Like, let's compare to Expendables.
Okay.
When the idea for Expendables first got floated, that Stallone and Schwarzenegger and all these other guys were all going to be in a movie together.
Yeah.
I remember a lot of the press thinking, and I don't blame them, but a lot of the press were saying, well, how is that going to work? These guys are all used to being leading men.
Right.
You crowbar them all in together. And
what the hell kind of budget do you have for that movie? My word.
Yeah, a budget, but also the fact that they were older guys, so there's that. Their stars weren't shining quite as brightly as they used to. But there's also the element of, doesn't that just feel weird for the audience, right?
Uh-huh.
Like, how do you see Schwarzenegger show up in a brief cameo, make a couple of Terminator jokes, and then he's done with the movie? Mm-hmm. That's a weird thing to do, and then to put Stallone front and center, it's just odd. But they did it real successfully. We've got 3 and pretty soon 4 successful Expendable movies, so it worked. Cobra Kai is another example. The fact that Cobra Kai was able to have Miguel be essentially the most important kid in the first couple seasons.
Yeah.
And then by season 3, it's not so much his story anymore. He's more relegated, right? Season 4
or at
especially.
Least, or at least more on even footing with the rest of the younger cast.
Yeah, they can do that. And audiences these days don't freak out so much. I think back in the 80s and certainly in the 90s too, there was more of a need to make it really clear, like, this is the villain, this is the star, this is the protagonist. Everybody had to be fitting into these certain criteria. So that's what would have made it tough at that time. Mm-hmm. But now, like, by today's standards, I think it'd be a great story that would really work well, is if you actually saw Daniel and Miyagi together, working with her and mentoring her. Mm-hmm. And in the end, kind of like Sam LaRusso in a way.
Yeah.
She ends up kind of drawing from Daniel and Miyagi, both having slightly different perspectives, right?
Yeah.
Maybe Daniel pulls her aside and tells her some things he went through personally. Mr. Miyagi's got his age-old wisdom. So I think it could be a really incredible movie. I think it'd be way better that way.
Cobra Kai would be very different now had the next Karate Kid been played out that way. Daniel we would have seen him get the beginning of his mentoring skills from Miyagi, and then his mentoring now in Cobra Kai would be very different. Like right now, he still really flounders with teaching these kids.
He flounders more than he teaches.
Yeah.
Yeah, Daniel's a flounderer. Speaking of which, I'm just going to float this theory. Look at the thumbnail right now, guys. Have this look at Hilary Swank.
Yeah.
Would you kind of say that maybe she sort of resembles Mary Mauser?
Huh?
And that maybe Sam's real mom,
Oh my.
just floating a theory, is actually Julie Pierce?
Oh my God.
So maybe this whole time, the true mother of Sam is Julie Pierce. Daniel
There's
did have
no
a little
question
something
about
with her.
Sam's mother.
And then Amanda doesn't even know that she never actually gave birth to Sam. Just floating the theory.
He just drugged Amanda for 9 months.
Doesn't make any sense.
Woke her up and said, "Hi, honey, you gave birth to a kid."
It makes zero sense. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, now let's talk about the second scenario. We're running out of time. Second scenario is Daniel shows up, maybe halfway, 3/4 through the movie. He has not a cameo, but he's a part of it. I think that's too weird now. That one I can't see happening.
Mm-hmm.
It's too fucked up because once you introduce him, the audience is going to be kind of starstruck. We're going to be distracted from the rest of the story.
Yeah.
Right?
Waiting. Where is he?
Yeah, and then all of a sudden there he is. It's a little too weird. I don't think that works. I think you could have had him early on and then take him out.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that'd be okay, but then that doesn't really fit the story either. How's that going to work?
Yeah.
He's there for a little bit. He leaves, now he's gone. Kind of like Julie and... not Julie, Jessica in Karate Kid 3.
Right. Yeah.
That was weird. A lot of people complained about how she didn't really fit the narrative, and that didn't make sense. So I think that brings us to our third option, which is Daniel basically has like a glorified cameo. He shows up maybe at the end or just has a couple little pieces, maybe on the phone. He talks to Jessica for a little bit. What do you think of these ideas?
Well, I don't know. I think that the option number one...
Jessica, Julie, I'm confusing their names.
Yeah. They both start with J. Option number one is, I think, the only real way that they could have done it, and cameos would have fell flat. Even then, I think. So it was probably best that he wasn't in it, now that we've come full circle.
Yeah, I think for universe building, I would have liked for him to be there.
Yeah.
In some way.
Yeah.
But unless he's there the whole time, I think it would have been a weird movie. I can't think of a way to just have him come in and out. And have him show up at the end for that fight scene. I'd love to have seen him there in that final fight where there's all that fire and shit. I'd love to see they could have had some good comedy where he and Miyagi talking about like, just let me get involved in this. No, Daniel-san, no. Like where Daniel wants to protect her and she could have had a unique relationship with both Daniel and Miyagi. Like where Daniel's more her peer in a way.
Yeah.
Although more experienced. I think that could have been interesting. And also, remember what Daniel says to Chosen in season 3 of Cobra Kai? He says something about how they're like karate cousins. Well, he is with Julie too.
Exactly, yeah.
In just as many ways. I mean, Julie was taught all the same stuff. So this is the same everything. So I think that would have been really cool if there are nods while she's fighting Ned. Well, she fights a couple of them, I think, right?
Yeah, she did.
I think it'd be cool if she has those moments where she looks at Miyagi and they have this understanding of something. But I also would have liked to see that with Daniel. Again, I just think it's too lame if Daniel just shows up in the end only and we don't really...
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe it could work if there were a bunch of phone calls along the way with Daniel and then he shows up at the end and he senses trouble.
So he's already a part of the story at that point and it's not so jarring, but...
Yeah, but even then, it still feels like... What is the importance of him? Like you're not letting it be her story very much then, Right. So I don't know, guys. Let us know what you think. Should Daniel have been in the next Karate Kid? Hey, maybe should it have just been another Karate Kid movie like with Daniel without Julie? Maybe we prefer that. We have preferred a fourth film. I can tell you briefly, I think the story was done with Karate Kid 3. And I never say that. I always, like with Cobra Kai, I think we can do 1 million seasons. I want season 1 million of Cobra Kai. But when it comes to the trilogy or the movie franchise, I actually don't think so. I think Daniel's story was done in Karate Kid 3.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? I don't think there was a way to make him the lead in any more karate movies. It was all the karate you could fit into 1 year. I don't think going into adulthood was going to work with any more karate. So anyway, guys, let us know what you think. You've been awesome about the comments. Let us know, comment, like, subscribe, and thank you for supporting the channel. We'll be back tomorrow with another video.
Yes, we will.